Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Metabolism and Menopause podcast. My name is Stephanie, and I am your host and CEO of Vitality OET. We are a women's nutrition, health, and fitness company that focuses predominantly on women's hormones, particularly as they start going through perimenopause and onwards. We know that you start experiencing so many changes in this time of your life, whether it be hot flashes, night sweats, irritability, brain fog, or waking around the middle that seems to have come out of absolutely nowhere, despite you not changing anything. So you go back to those tried and true methods of cutting calories, cutting carbs, doing a bunch of cardio, yet nothing seems to be working. In fact, it feels like you're putting in all this effort and you're actually moving backwards. But we know now that your body is inherently different than what it was to you prior to having these hormonal changes. So our mission here at Vitality is to really help you understand how your body changes in this time of your life so you can reach those health and fitness goals, feel in control and at home in your body again, live a life full of vitality, and really understand how to take care of this new body of yours. So today I have the wonderful Coach Hannah back on the podcast again. A little while back, we did a whole podcast on sleep and we talked about circadian rhythm and how it's so important for cortisol levels and hormones and being able to lose weight. And we touched a little bit on shift workers, and we work with a decent amount of shift workers. We have lots of nurses and people who have to do shift work, and we're so lucky to have them in our lives because they play such a huge role in our society. However, shift work is notoriously really not that great for you, hard to sleep. We know that. We see higher instances of different chronic diseases in shift workers. So we wanted to briefly go over some of the stuff that we talked about last podcast that we had together. And then we're going to dive into a little bit more specifically for shift workers, what you can do, why you struggle, what are the things that you have to be aware of, because if we don't know these things, we can't change these things and we can't be proactive. And unfortunately, we tend to go all the time. And then we get to a point where it's just like, what do we do? So let's do a quick little recap of the sleep stuff first, and then we'll hop right in with the shift worker stuff.
Yes. So I love sleep and talking about sleep. I think it's because I used to totally neglect sleep, and now I'm like, it is just magic. But refresh for everybody, the thing in our body that helps to set our circadian clock is the SCN, suprachiasmatic nucleus, but you just got to know SCN. It is a little light sensor that is in our brain, and it is super duper sensitive to light. And when we are exposed to light, like daylight, evening light, that light helps to set our body's clock. Is it morning? Is it afternoon? Is it evening? Every organism on this planet is connected to the same 24-hour clock. That is mind-boggling. But we humans are not nocturnal by nature. We evolved waking with the sun, sleeping in the dark, because there were no artificial lights that made it possible for us to live in the middle of the night like we have now. Those are the two really big things to know is we are organisms that are meant to be awake during the day. All organisms on this planet are on the same 24-hour clock. And the thing that helps to set this clock in our bodies is called the SCN. So there are definitely things that we have in our life today and just in general things that have existed that can throw off our circadian clock. So what are they? Sleep disorders are one, mood disorders, eating after daylight hours, assuming you are on a daytime awake schedule, nighttime asleep schedule, caffeine intake, especially caffeine intake later into the day, stress levels, blood sugar dysregulation, alcohol consumption, light and lack thereof. And those are the big ones that are going to throw off our circadian clock. So what are some of the things that can improve our circadian clock, Steph?
So there are lots of things that you can do, but it's things that we don't want to do, right? So sleep wake consistency. This one is a huge one. So we're going to do a bit of a refresher in a minute here. Sunlight in the morning and afternoons, trying to avoid screens, bright blue light 2 to 3 hours before bed. This is where those blue blocker glasses can come in super handy. Utilizing things like sleep masks or noise machines. Having your bedtime snack before bed can do wonders. I actually just had a conversation with a woman before I hopped on here, and she's been tracking her sleep very diligently. And she was like, man, like, why am I showing higher levels of stress from my Whoop or whatever it was that she was using? She's like, it was so high last night. I'm like, well, what'd you have for a bedtime snack? And she's like, oh, I had a margarita and I also had ice cream. And I'm like, okay, so this is where we went wrong, because like alcohol is going to impact your sleep quality, but also just having that sugary treat before bed is going to spike your blood sugars, and then they're going to drop, and cortisol is going to spike, and that's a huge stress on your body. So having a bedtime snack with part carb and part protein or fat can do a huge difference for stabilizing blood sugars at night, as well as lowering your cortisol levels. So this would be things like popcorn and a turkey pepperoni stick, meat, cheese, and crackers, oatmeal with some protein powder, yogurt with some granola, whole grain toast that has some fiber with some peanut butter on top. Typically, we avoid fruit before bed because it does digest quite quickly. And I had someone comment on a reel the other day that was like, oh, cutting your, like, she's like, or just don't eat before bed and you won't have that issue. I'm like, no, because if you go too long without food, your blood sugar is going to drop. Your cortisol levels are going to rise. They're going to break down muscle mass for energy, take it to your liver, turn it into sugar, dump it into your bloodstream, and your blood sugar is going to jump up anyways. So you're still going to have that same effect. So having that bedtime snack can make a huge difference. And then anything to help you bring yourself into that rest and digest portion of your nervous system. So this can be like legs up on the wall. It can be humming, anything that's going to help with your vagus nerve. We did a podcast on that before, but anything to really help bring those cortisol levels down before bed to help you have a better sleep. So I do want to circle back to that sleep-wake consistency for just a second here. The more consistent our sleep patterns, the better our overall health is likely to be. Think of a toddler. When they miss nap time, they are little terrors. They are not so fun to deal with. The more that you can keep the same wake-sleep cycles, the better it is for your health in general. So sleep consistency is the top contributing factor for longevity. So trying to keep it within the same 30 minutes is ideal on either end. So going to sleep and waking. So if possible, even if going to bed late or in another time zone, try to wake up at that same time that would normally be in your time zone every day. This is most important for sleep consistency, as it will signal to your body to feel tired at your normal time. So this is where, like, when we travel, we go from almost West Coast to East Coast all the time. And it's like, okay, we're getting up for a conference. You got to be there by 8. So we got to leave here by like 7. So we got to be up by like 6. That's like 4 a.m. our time. So I always struggle with sleep when we travel east. When we go west, I find it not as challenging. But going east can be really, really hard for us sometimes. But being able to find that regular wake and sleep cycle is huge. And I honestly think that's why I've had such a good pregnancy, was because the sleep wake cycle has been like pretty standard the entire time, making it much less stressful on my body compared to what other people go through. So we cannot stress that part enough. Like, the sleep wake cycles actually make a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, for sure. And don't worry, like, we'll talk about how to kind of have these consistent sleep-wake schedules, even if you are somebody who works at different times on different days, different weeks, whatever that may be. And we know that it is sometimes not possible to sleep when it's dark and be awake when it's light, especially in shift work. About 1/4 of the adult population workforce works shift work, and that is like outside of the normal 9 to 5 range. So that would be like the second or the third shifts or 12-hour shifts that people are working, where it's like, okay, these people are probably awake when it is dark outside and not quote unquote bedtime.
Yeah. And we need those people, right? They have very important jobs, like people in the police force and firefighters and paramedics and nurses and doctors, like very, very, very important role that they play in society. So it's just learning more about this to help be more proactive for yourself. So this is really why I want to give all of the shift workers out there a little extra love, a little extra attention today, just because there are many aspects of ideal sleep that really aren't going to be easy for you to accomplish, but there are many things that you can do to benefit your overall health. So today we're going to cover the dangers of shift work in terms of like your health, and then dive into the ways that you can support your body if you are a shift worker. And this is also going to like affect your hormones, your ability to lose weight, right? So anything that's going to improve your health is also going to help with that. So that's how this is all going to tie in for you.
Yeah, so we'll start with the dangers of like shift work on your health and excuse me, move into the more positive things that you can do, because some of these things, like, it's not your choice to be awake or not. You're doing your job and we need you to do your jobs. And so let's talk about the dangers so you're aware of them. And then we'll really focus heavily on how to support your body. So one of the dangers of shift work on our health is increased insomnia. So it's often on the opposite, like shift working schedules are on the opposite of the typical physiological 24-hour clock, where we're meant to be awake when the sun is up and asleep when the sky is dark. And the prevalence of insomnia in shift workers is between 29% and 38%, whereas the general population is only 6% who have insomnia. So it's very high in comparison. And shift workers also tend to report higher levels of overall sleepiness compared to those who work day shifts or just a normal 9-to-5 job.
This is why I'm always so excited when we have nurses that work with us who are like, oh, I got switched to just daytime. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to help so much. So the next one is increased fatigue. Natural, like that's going to come naturally, right? If you're struggling with sleep and constantly changing your schedules all the time, you're going to experience more tiredness, more fatigue than other people, right? Research shows that one night without sleep requires approximately 1 to 2 nights of sleep to restore, just get you back to that normal level of performance fully after multiple nights baseline is not achieved after 7 nights of sleep. So like, because lots of you are, flip-flopping back and forth all the time. So you don't actually ever get to like fully restore where you are, or it's like you get those 4 days off. The first 2, you're just like really lagging. Then you feel good for 2, and then you go into it again, right? So increased fatigue is also a very, very, very big one.
Yeah, for sure. And then with that, I'm sure many of us drive cars, even like lots of shift work involves operating other motor vehicles or like equipment. And there's lots of evidence to show that industrial and motor vehicle accidents are at their peak probability in the overnight hours into the early morning hours. So if you are somebody who works throughout the night and you're commuting home after a shift, you are at an increased risk of a motor vehicle collision, which puts not like only you and of course like all other shift workers who are in the same position as you at risk, but also like everybody else who could be around in their cars or on the sidewalk. So just something to be aware of. I would encourage you, like take a little rest in your car before driving. If you're like, I'm about to fall asleep, save yourself, save a bunch of other people.
The next one is constant jet lag. You do not need to change time zones to experience jet lag, believe it or not. In fact, many of us experience it on a weekly basis when we stay up too late or we sleep in a few extra hours. We may not think that it makes a difference to do 1 or 2 times per week, but it actually totally does. It throws off our body clock. So when you are flip-flopping your sleep schedule from days to nights, or even like waking up for daytime activities and sleeping at random times, if you constantly work nights, then you are constantly jet lagged as well. So again, that's going to be an issue because jet lag has been studied and proven to shorten your lifespan. I'm sorry this is so negative. I know we're like giving you all the doom and gloom, but I promise you we have good news at the end of this. I promise.
I know. I wanted to condense all of the not so great things together so that we can end just like on good notes with lots of positives moving forward. It's just important to know. So many people don't know these things, especially if you are a shift worker. Like, just be aware of these things. Shift workers also have an increased risk of chronic diseases. So lots of studies show that there's associations between shift work and cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, obesity, type 2 diabetes, gastrointestinal disturbances, asthma, erectile dysfunction, menstrual irregularities, pregnancy complications, breast cancer, prostate cancer, colorectal cancer. Causality is still not clear. And so there's like plenty of room here for further research. Like, what is the cause of this in shift workers? We just know that there is an association of some kind between these things and those who work shift work. And the last thing is shift work, or like swing shift work, where you go 4 days of days into 4 days of nights. This can lead your adrenals to be out of balance, which means that there are going to be random spikes in cortisol throughout the day that does not follow like a typical cortisol curve. And this is going to negatively impact your dopamine system, as well as your learning and overall well-being. So we talk about stress and cortisol here all of the time. We'll talk more about it here today. But swing shifts are a huge, huge, huge stress on your body, and your cortisol is gonna show that. So, Steph, take us into the positives here. How do we support our bodies as shift workers, and how do we avoid some of these dangers that are involved with shift work?
So I do want to say, with like the increased like chronic disease risk, we know stress is like one of the biggest things when it comes to chronic disease risk, when it comes to obesity and metabolic syndrome and cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes and gut health and hormones and breast cancer and all these things. We know stress plays such a huge role in this. So I would be inclined to say there's likely, like I'm sure it'll come out in the research eventually, that the stress response on shift workers is what's causing that link to those increased risks of chronic diseases. So just more reason to take care of your cortisol, you guys. You know, we're never going to not talk about it on a podcast because it's so freaking important. So how to support your body as a shift worker to avoid some of those dangers that we talked about, because I know a lot of you are like probably feeling pretty crappy right now, where you're like, but I like my career, or you know, this is how I'm paying bills. I don't have the option to not. So like, what am I supposed to do? We can help you with this. Okay. So we're going to break down some like actual tangible things that you can do. And the first one is really maximizing your sleep duration and your sleep quality. And this is in order to improve safety of an individual. So try and keep the same sleep-wake schedule for the whole week. Ideally, every day if you do not work on a rotating schedule. When rotating week to week, for the weeks of days, stay on that regular day schedule, and on nights, keep on a night schedule. Try and keep a cool, quiet, dark room. Things to consider: blackout curtains and sound machines. We bought blackout curtains because, like, for me, as soon as the sun is up, I am awake so fast. And if I'm going to be napping with baby, I'm going to need some blackout curtains. Otherwise, I know it's not going to happen. So blackout curtains, amazing. Sound machines, super great. Try to maintain the same schedule for 14 days at least, if you are possible. So schedule your change and shift for back-to-back weeks in order to do this. Again, if you can. For some of you, I know it's not going to be possible. Melatonin supplementation to ensure you fall asleep on schedule, or potentially other sleep and wake inducing medications. So melatonin supplements can be 85 to 400% of what is listed on the actual bottle. So that's something to be aware of, and focus on the behavioral changes first before leaning on melatonin, as there's no studies on the super physiological doses. So this would be, you know, like having the bedtime snacks and everything that we'll talk about to help you sleep. Like we've talked about it before on the past sleep podcast. You can go back and check that out. But doing those lifestyle changes that are going to help support your cortisol levels to help improve sleep are going to be really important for you.
Yeah, melatonin can be tricky. But if you know that it helps you to fall asleep, it's better to fall asleep and be able to sleep than lay there awake, because like we've talked about, like there are some difficulties already with shift work. So take the melatonin if you need the melatonin. If you've done all of these things and you still are like, hey, I just need that little extra boost, I would say take like kids' melatonin and take half of it if possible, because like Steph said, it can be 85 to 400% more than what it says on there, which is just craziness. Same with trying to have that like consistent sleep schedule. We want to also have a consistent eating schedule. If you go back and listen to the previous sleep podcast, we talk about how eating can also impact our body clock, not as aggressively as the SCN can, but eating at different times will say to your body, it's a different time of day. So if you are rotating, like say you have a week of nights and then the rest of the month, your days, try to have one eating schedule for your days and one eating schedule for your nights. This can be really hard in some professions. So I would encourage you to have some easy to consume on the go foods like smoothies in order to avoid not consuming any nutrients for many extended hours. I've worked with many nurses in the past, and this is one of the things that has helped so many of them to actually nourish their bodies and feel good and not be dependent on caffeine, which we will also talk about here. Is just having a smoothie that has lots of different things in it. You can add fruits, veggies, healthy fats, protein, so many good things. And I know that you can drink water when you're working, most of you. And like if you're in surgery for 8 hours, like you can't do anything, which is crazy, but like you guys are amazing. But like if you're a nurse or you're working in a factory or warehouse or whatever, try and have like liquid nutrients or really fast things that you can eat and have that be on a relatively consistent schedule. If you go super long without food, you're going to have that additional risk of elevating your cortisol, imbalanced blood sugars, which can lead to potential insulin resistance, and just a whole plethora of things that we can avoid if we can keep a consistent schedule.
The next one is timed light exposure. So viewing bright light before work will help tell your body, hey, it's time to be awake. We're doing the things. And avoiding bright lights after work will help your body be like, oh yeah, it's time to calm down. It's time to settle in. It'll lower those cortisol levels, all the things that we need. And that will also help you with like natural melatonin production as well, which is very important. So 100,000 lux in the first few hours you are awake. This is hard to get with artificial light. So if possible, get outdoors for some sunlight. You can also purchase a light box. Typically they're about 10,000 lux. So keep them on nearby when getting up and getting ready for your day, whether it is daylight or evening hours. So if you're getting ready for the day and it's nighttime, having those lights can be really helpful. Using those blue blocker glasses at the end of a shift can be so helpful, as well as after a shift. Consider those amber colored lenses for better filtration to allow your body to shift more into sleep mode. Because like melatonin actually cannot be produced in the presence of blue light. So we need to make sure, like if your melatonin is low, it's hard to fall asleep. So this is why that light exposure is so important. And like, do you ever notice how good your kids sleep after they've been outside in the sun? So good. We are all just plants deprived of sunlight that are not thriving, like the one that's on my desk over here. Like we all need more sunlight. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, so planned naps are going to be the next thing. If you can plan naps into your days to ensure that you are getting enough sleep in general, that is going to be super helpful. They can be used in many ways to support shift work. So if you can nap after a shift, that can extend the amount of time that you can be quote unquote awake for the day when trying to shift from nights to days. So say you leave your shift at 7 and then you eat, whether it's a meal or a snack, and then you go to the gym for like 45 minutes or an hour, come home, shower, and then take like a 30-minute to 2-hour nap. And then wake up, have some food and some caffeine so that you can stay up until it is at least almost or like truly is your bedtime in that schedule shift. So when you do this, try to be awake from your nap before noon. That way you have plenty of like actual, daylight hours to get things back to a normal schedule. Napping before a shift can help when you are shifting from days to nights and have a hard time staying asleep long enough the day before to like feel good through that shift. So say you wake up naturally at 8 a.m., you can have a normal like quote unquote daytime morning and then have your lunch. And then after your lunch, take that like 30-minute to 2-hour nap, get up again and shift into that like night shift morning, quote unquote morning schedule. Maybe you go for a walk or exercise, eat, view the sunset, and then head to work. Especially when there's like this flip-flopping that happens, it can be really hard to go like straight from one sleep schedule to another one. And so utilizing these planned naps can be really, really beneficial for ensuring that you get enough sleep. On off days, I know so many people who will just like sleep, but then they can't sleep when they need to really sleep for their shifts. So use, again, these 30-minute to 120-minute naps in the first half of that quote unquote daytime schedule, because it could be like the nighttime or the daytime that you're working. So say you go to bed at 10 p.m. on an actual day shift schedule, you want your nap to be complete, like awake from your nap by 2 p.m. So you have that solid 8 hours before bed to like exist and use more energy and then get a good night of sleep. And so then use that kind of 8-hour time frame before sleeping to determine when you should be awake from your nap, whatever your typical schedule is. That's just one example. The trouble with naps can be wanting to stay asleep longer than that 30 to 120 minutes. But this is where you're really going to create so much more of that jet lag feeling, which we're going to dive in more to combating that jet lag in just a bit here. But when you're taking these planned naps, make sure that it is planned for 30 to 120 minutes and you get up when it is time to get up in order to get the benefit and not harm yourself moving forward.
Yes, because naps can be very good, but naps can also like mess things up. So this is where like actually planning it out can be super helpful. And this is where like having the blackout curtains and the sound machines and all those things can make a big difference for you. So the next one is caffeine. Use only in the first half of a shift or before the shift begins. Of course, being smart with caffeine intake is not to consume it on an empty stomach or consume in excess, because what we actually see is that when people have caffeine on an empty stomach is that cortisol can increase quite quickly, but also it can spike blood sugars in some people. So even if you're like not having breakfast and you're just having caffeine on an empty stomach, you can see a big spike in your blood sugar. So that's something to really be aware of. So always have caffeine if you're going to have it the first half of a shift or before the shift begins, but never on an empty stomach. If you are feeling sleepy mid to late shift, use things like water, electrolytes, getting some movement, or nutrition to provide energy. This is where your carbs can come in handy. They give you the energy. So making sure to avoid caffeine in that later mid part of your shift. You need to be aware of that and avoid it if you can, because it's going to disrupt your sleep and the naps later, which will cause that negative ripple effect moving forward. So really resist the urge on having caffeine after that mid-late part of your shift. Now we're going to dive into this whole jet lag business that we've talked about a few times here. We really want to help you all understand how to combat this and even avoid it when working switch shifts or even with a consistent night shift. Avoiding that jet lag, if you can prepare each week for 1 to 2 days to swap between days and nights, there are 4 big things that can be hugely beneficial and helpful for you that we're going to dive into here.
So number 1 here in avoiding that jet lag or combating the jet lag is temperature, and just understanding your body temperature and how to utilize external heat or cold to your advantage in these situations. So our body temperature is going to be at its lowest 90 minutes to 120 minutes before our normal wake time. and it's going to be the highest in the mid-afternoon. And the 90 to 120 minute low, or 90 to 120 minutes before we wake up, like that low temperature is known as our temperature minimum. And then the afternoon is known as our temperature maximum. So of course, if you're working night shifts, your temperature minimum is not going to be in the morning. Your temperature minimum is going to be 90 to 120 minutes before you wake up. And that temperature maximum is going to be whatever your like nighttime afternoon is. So if your temperature is decreasing, you want to avoid light. If your temperature is increasing, we want to get light. So 90 to 120 minutes before you wake up until mid-afternoon, trying to get light. After that mid-afternoon point, trying to avoid light so that we can keep our sleep schedule or change our sleep schedule to combat this jet lag. So how do we utilize this, right? So a hot shower or a hot bath is going to lead to a cooling effect afterwards, which is going to be more conducive to sleep. So if you've ever heard somebody say, take a hot shower before bed, it's because that hot temperature is going to lead your body to actually cool down to get back to, like baseline. So adding heat externally will lead you to cool down. This doesn't mean sleep in a hot room. Doesn't work the same. Not as good for your sleep. Please sleep in a cool room. But a cold shower or ice bath is going to lead to a warming effect after, which is more conducive to waking hours. So if you want to get up and get right into a hot shower, that's going to lead to a delay in your temperature maximum. And that means you're going to have like a delayed increase in your body temperature. So your body temperature is going to peak, say, an hour later. So if you get into that cold shower or bath right away after waking, that peak is going to come about an hour earlier. So when we're switching between day shifts and night shifts, you can use those different temperature techniques, external temperature techniques, to move your body's schedule earlier or later to help reduce that jet lag. Pretty neat, because like we don't have to follow like hard rules, but just like knowing when's your temperature minimum, when's your temperature maximum, and utilizing that is something that can help so much. We'll talk about like relation to temperature minimum and maximum and some other things here as well. But like go back and listen to that a couple times if you're not understanding it, because that's the key to combating this jet lag in shift work.
Yeah. So like, let's say that you want to go to bed at like actual nighttime. You would shower before bed, hot shower. That's going to help you sleep during the night. If you want to shower before going to work, and let's say you're doing a night shift, you would shower before going to work and then do like a cold before you get out or whatever to bring that temperature down, that cold exposure to then keep you awake in the nighttime. So that's how you can kind of think about it in terms of water exposure to help you out, because that's a pretty simple thing that you can do that can make a big difference. So okay, so the next one is light. Get bright light in the first few hours of your day. Avoid bright lights in the last few hours of your days. So if you are awake for a night shift, get artificial light, view the sunset. This will wake you up because your schedule is reversed. Viewing the sunrise in the morning and avoiding artificial light, your body will take this as the opposites of beginning and end of the day. Since your schedule is opposite, it is still good for you to view that natural light. So this is where those blue blocker glasses can be really handy in the last hour of your shift. Maybe you're wearing blue blocker glasses, and maybe they're not the amber ones, but you can get ones that look just like regular glasses to help you to get your body working to be okay, we're getting ready for sleep in a little bit here, which can be really helpful.
Yeah, I'm actually wearing blue blockers right now, even though it's 3:30 in the afternoon, because I have not gotten enough sleep because I just came back from travel. And so I'm planning to go to bed very early today. So blocking out all the light that I can right now. But the next thing is meal timing. So already touched on how meals and eating windows can change our body clock. And so if we are eating within 90 minutes of waking, we want to try to stop eating large meals 2 to 3 hours before bed. So eating within that 90 minutes of waking is going to help to energize you for what is supposed to be your daytime And stopping big meals 2 to 3 hours before bed is going to tell your body, hey, it's time to wind down and chill out. A bedtime snack, as we mentioned already, is going to be beneficial for you to help combat cortisol levels from working shift work or just work in general or life stress. And it's going to help to support a more restful and restorative sleep. We love a carb and protein snack. Don't neglect your carbs. Doesn't have to be big. It can be small. But don't be afraid of a bedtime snack. But try to avoid like really big, heavy meals in those 2 to 3 hours before, especially if you're switching between nights and days, because if you're eating super close to bed, that's gonna tell your, like a huge meal close to bed, that's gonna tell your body like, oh, we're supposed to be awake right now, and we want to avoid that. So if you're going to be switching schedules, you can just move your meal times earlier or later, depending on quote unquote which direction you're traveling. So we're talking about jet lag here, but many of you are just, you're staying in your same place, you're staying in your same time zone, you're just switching between days and nights. So let's think about going ahead in time zones as traveling east. So this is going to be going from nights to days. And then we're going to consider traveling from days to nights as going west. So when we are traveling east, or that night to day shift, we want to start eating meals 15 minutes earlier every few days. So ideally, we can do this over 2 weeks, but we know there are not always ideals. And so even if you're going to be switching to days, say 1 week from today, tomorrow or today, start eating 15 minutes earlier for all of your meals. And then in 2 days, try to eat those meals 30 minutes earlier from your normal time. In 4 days, 45 minutes earlier. In 6 days, an hour earlier. And that way your body's already starting to shift in that quote unquote time zone. And while this is not going to be like the schedule that you eat on, it's definitely going to get your body closer to adapting to that schedule of the switched shifts. You can even try to eat all meals like super early in the night, the day before you officially switch, in order for your body to be ready for daytime eating. So like eating all 3 of your main meals before like your normal lunchtime in that night shift, or like afternoon snack time in that night shift. So for example, if you have like your breakfast before work, and then you have a snack at work, and then you have your lunch and an afternoon snack and dinner, and then you go home and go to sleep, try to have all of those meals before like what that lunchtime would be, so that it's easier for your body and like all of your GI juices and those wonderful, sexy things to shift earlier, so that it's easier for you to change. And then when you are traveling, quote unquote, from west, or traveling west, so that would be from day shifts to night shifts, you want to do the opposite. So you want to start eating 15 minutes later. A lot of times this will be easier in digestion to just push things later. So you might be able to move even further along in that quote unquote time zone over 1 week compared to the reverse. A lot of times it's harder to train our body to eat earlier than it is to eat later. So shifting from days to nights can be a bit easier. Like Steph said, like traveling west is often a lot easier than traveling east.
Yeah. So this is where so if you're going from night to day, you're trying to eat earlier. If you're going from days to nights, you're trying to eat later. So you're just shifting it in the direction that you want. So just try and think of it that way. The next one is exercise. Using exercise in alignment within the hours before or after your temperature minimum will also help to avoid that jet-lagged feeling. So to wake up earlier on days to come, shift your exercise to be within the 4 hours after your temperature minimum. So to wake up later on days to come, shift your exercise to within 4 hours before that temperature minimum. So this means when you are going to be going from nights to days, you want to work out after waking up before your night shift. If you are shifting from days to nights, you want to work out after your day shift before going to bed. So easy way to think of that is like morning workouts versus like evening workouts, to like just help your body transition a bit that way.
Yeah. So it may be really, really hard to get up and go to the gym before that shift, but it is often something that is going to be really helpful for you to shift between those days and nights. Also, if you have just one random shift that is opposite from your schedule in a week, so say you're working nights normally, but you have one day shift, you'll probably have a couple days between on either side, but say you just have that one day shift, as hard as that may be, you want to try to stay on that normal night shift schedule and utilize naps to supplement your sleep. Getting your body to shift for one 24-hour cycle and then shifting back is just going to cause more harm than good. So suffer for the one day instead of creating multiple days of jet lag suffering on your body, because as we've said, jet lag is something that can lead us to having a shorter lifespan. So let's extend our lifespan and stick it out for one day and suffer for a little while and just keep that normal schedule that you have for like night shifts, and we'll figure it out later.
So some important things to note. The atypical hours of shift workers are going to be linked to poor health habits, including but not limited to disruption of regular meal timing, increased snacking. You're going to have increased caloric intake a lot of the time, less physical activity, and shift work has been implicated in impaired glucose tolerance, weight gain, and being overweight. Rotating shift workers exhibit a higher odds ratio for metabolic syndrome compared to their day shift counterparts. So if you're someone who is working night shifts or you're flip-flopping a lot, there is going to be a higher risk of developing things like diabetes and weight gain. And that is something you need to be aware of. For female shift workers in particular, they are at a higher risk of developing metabolic syndrome or diabetes in comparison to male shift workers. This is because our hormones are different. Men can handle stress a lot more than we can, and flip-flopping, doing the shift work is a stress on your body. In permanent night shift workers, there is going to be an elevated risk of obesity, whereas diabetes and hypertension are more associated with that like flip-flopping back and forth between day shift, night shift. So that is something to be aware of. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that here, but like that doesn't mean you're screwed. You know, there's lots of things that we can do.
Yeah. So we kept most of like the hard negatives at the beginning, but it's just important to know these things. And also that none of this means that you are destined for any of those previously mentioned things to happen to you. The reason that we are cycling back here and talking about them is so that we can also touch on some just like super basic health things that we can do to support your body, support combating the jet lag, and just like helping you no matter what your schedule is as a shift worker, because we need you guys. So some simple things to remember are going to be just keeping your activity up on a regular basis, trying to avoid being super sedentary. So even on an off day, aiming for like 7,000 to 10,000 steps, even if you're resting from like exercise, quote unquote, like exercise movement, like getting steps in is really helpful just to keep that activity up. And in general, no matter what rest or off day or work day, aim for 30 to 60 minutes of activity each day, whether it's stretching, yoga, lifting, Pilates, jumping rope, you name it, 30 to 60 minutes. And you can even separate it throughout the day. So maybe it's like 15 minutes before work, 15 minutes after work. Getting up during your shift and doing 10 squats or 10 jumping jacks every hour or so, even like every 3 hours if you're working like a 12-hour shift, can make an immense difference in your overall activity levels without being exhausting. And it actually often helps to energize you throughout the shift to, again, avoid needing more caffeine to get through the end of that shift. So these little like movement snacks can be huge during like shift work for energy purposes, but also just overall activity purposes.
Great for blood sugar control too. The next one is consuming fruits and vegetables regularly. aim to have veggies with all your main meals and fruits with snacks. This is not a very tough rule. Just helps to help you hit at least 3 kinds of veggies and 2 kinds of fruit. Go back and listen to our pre and probiotic podcast that we did to really understand why this is so important, because there are so many different types of fiber. There are over 11 different kinds. Like, there are so many. And all of them are going to help feed our gut microbiome in a different way. So this is where like people are like, oh, I like to eat the same all the time. Like, sweet, but can we rotate a different fruit each week? Or like, cause I will go and buy like 2 bananas, 2 plums, and a peach for this week. Like, and then I'll do berries or something. Like, I'm always adding some different stuff. Same with your veggies, because it is very important for gut health. And we know gut health does take a hit in a lot of shift workers.
I'm a huge fan of mixed frozen berries and mixed frozen veggies because it makes it so easy to get variety. The next thing is just staying hydrated. Easier said than done, but ideally we want to hit half of our body weight in ounces as our daily water minimum intake. So for example, I'm a little bit under 180 pounds. So the minimum ounces of water I shoot for in a day is 90. Typically I drink more because I can suck down water like no other, but I used to hate drinking water. But if you're sweaty, I'm a very sweaty person. So if you're sweaty, you want to try and get another 15 ounces or so for every hour that you spend sweating. So like if you go for a 10-minute walk, you don't need another 15 ounces of water. If you're sweating a little bit, you just drink a couple extra sips. But if you're doing like a hard workout and you're sweating for a long time, definitely drink more than that daily minimum because you're going to be dehydrated otherwise.
The next one is get in your sunlight. Despite whatever shift you are working, natural sunlight without sunglasses is so good for your long-term health and well-being. Walking before or after a shift, or even having your pre-shift caffeine while sitting outside in the daylight works wonders. So I used to travel for work. Like, I would do 3 hours one way, 3 hours back. It was brutal. But I would always go a little bit earlier. So when I got out of my car, because usually when I would leave, it'd be dark. So I would get out of my car. I would go for like a 10-minute walk, try and get some sunlight. Because otherwise I was like in an office all the time, or in a gym, or in a studio, or in the hospital. And there's like never enough light in there. So I would do a walk before I would go like start my day. And like that helped me a ton compared to when I wasn't doing that.
Yeah, sunlight is like magic. Another thing is resistance training to build that muscle, build that strength, support healthy bones later into life. We know that is super important, especially women. So the more strength and the more muscle that we can build now, the better off we'll be in the future, supporting our overall health.
And we know during perimenopause and menopause in particular, it's very hard to put on muscle mass when estrogen goes down. Bill Campbell actually is like finally taking the head on this like research stuff. Thank goodness. Like, I'm so pumped to have someone that I actually know like taking this more seriously and not just being like, oh, it's a lie, you're not trying hard. Like, he's actually like diving into it. And he'd actually just published a study that showed that women with the same exercise intensity, premenopausal versus menopausal and postmenopausal, the difference in a 12-week workout program, 12-week or 10-week, I can't remember, but it was an 8% difference in the ability to put on muscle mass, which is actually like quite significant. So I thought that was pretty cool. So sucks to hear that, but like, this is why resistance training is so important. It'll help you with your blood sugar as well. The next one, of course, regulate your cortisol levels no matter what, period. Most important thing ever, 100%. If we don't get our cortisol levels under control, good luck trying to do anything else. It does not work. Anything that you do to improve your cortisol levels and cortisol control is going to improve your metabolism, is going to improve your health. It's going to make weight loss easier and improve your health. So things that you can do: lay on the floor or on your bed, feet up on the wall, so you're making like an L shape. That will bring blood flow away from your legs and back to your gut to help with digestion and bloating, which is a bonus. but it helps lower your cortisol levels. It slows down your breathing. It slows down your heart rate. You are able to get into that rest and digest portion of your nervous system out of fight or flight, which will help you with sleep. Because if our cortisol is high, we cannot sleep. We also cannot produce melatonin. So very important. Use box breathing. Or other forms of calming breath work. So breathing in for 4 seconds, holding for 4 seconds, exhaling for 4, holding for 4. Exhaling is going to have the best result for your cortisol levels and lowering your heart rate and breathing rate. So you could do like breathing in and then like really focus on a slow exhale. That will help you as well. So you can do this before bed. You can do this in your work, like take a couple minutes to do that to get you out of that constant state of fight or flight. It can be after a workout as well, after work. We need to make sure that you're doing things for your body to help support your cortisol levels. And the most important part of every podcast that I will ever say, the number one thing that you can do to improve your cortisol levels is to eat enough food. Make sure you are having enough carbohydrates because carbs have an inverse relationship with cortisol, so it will actually bring your cortisol levels down. Make sure you're doing the appropriate types of activities. So we're not doing the crazy hits, the cardios, all those things. Everyone's like, oh, but women in perimenopause, if you have low energy, if you are not sleeping well, if you are in a stress state, if you are eating low calorie, if you are eating low carb, HIIT is contraindicated, okay? We all just like to pick and choose what we see from studies, but this is what we're seeing. Women who are in a poor hormone state, not sleeping, not having energy, eating low calorie, eating low carb, HIIT is not going to benefit you, okay? HIIT is really good for once things are better, then you can do that. But for most of us, we are not better. We are worse. We need to get better first, and then we can go into that later because that's actually going to push you backwards. So whatever you can do to improve stress management, because as our hormones decline, we can't handle as much stress. We need to learn to buffer it through all the things that we talk about with proper food and getting enough calories and carbs and the right kind of exercise and sleep and understanding how to utilize these naps and cold exposure therapy to help you sleep better or stay awake better. Like all of these things matter so much. So we cannot stress that enough. And if you need help figuring out like where to even start, because it can seem very overwhelming, just message me. I will always help you calculate where your food should be for free. I literally did it for 7 people this morning via my DMs. It takes me some time to get back to you sometimes because there's a lot of you who want that done, but I am more than happy to do that. So there just might be a delay in answering, but please take advantage of that because there is literally no strings attached. This is what I love to do. I want to help you not be stressed, to feel good, to feel healthy, and get you moving in the right direction.
Yeah, so this next one really ties in to managing stress levels also. And it's spending time with the people you love or the people who bring you joy and doing the things that bring you joy. Health and happiness have a very strong connection. And so many of us just stop doing the things that make us happy because life gets busy and we're stressed and we think we don't have time for it. So we don't make the time for it, but we make the time for other things that often lead us to being more stressed out. So it is super important to remember to bring joy into your life, however that may be for you. It probably looks a little bit different to all of us, but there will be some similar ties of like the people in your life that you love and the activities that you love doing. So maybe it's cooking or baking, hiking. This is something for me that like, if I haven't gone for a hike in a really long time, I feel sad. And immediately if I start hiking, like I can physically feel how my body changes. Maybe it's watching movies, reading books, FaceTiming with people that you love, trying new coffee shops. This one I love. Travel. And then maybe if you're like Steph, it's trying out all the local donut shops. Whatever it is, there are seriously so many things in this world that can bring joy into our lives. So whatever it is for you, make sure you create the space for that happiness. It is not worth skipping out on those things just to get one or two more things on your to-do list done, because the more time we spend doing the things on our to-do list, the less and less time we're going to spend doing things that bring us joy. And it's so important for our longevity to have joy on a consistent basis. Steph, do you have any other things that come to mind for like general health tip reminders for everyone, but specifically shift workers?
Like connection and doing the things that you love really matters. Like we always say we don't have time, but we do. It's just a matter of commitment, and we have no trouble committing to things that we freaking hate, right? Jobs that we don't like, going to events that we don't want to go to, traveling to things that we don't want to do, agreeing to get-togethers that like you have no desire to go to. You have to realize that like it's not that you don't have time, it's that you don't care enough to do it for yourself, which sucks. And this is something that I've learned, and it's been tough because I've definitely lost people, or people are like, oh, Steph is this, Steph is that. And it's like, no, like I've learned like I'm doing things that bring me joy, that are good for my health. And like, I'm never going to do something like negative to another person. That's not what this is about. But it's like, I care about my health because it allows me to show up as the person that I want to be. And like other people are like, oh, well, I care so much what Steph thinks about me, but she doesn't care as much as what I think about her. And that's like they get kind of like upset with that almost, where it's like, I've been very good now at like being able to build boundaries. And just because that I'm not busy does not mean that I'm available. And I'm not going to offer to do something if I don't want to do something, right? Like I'm not going to do it just because like I feel like I quote unquote have to. Like there's certain things, obviously responsibility wise, yes. But like I'm never going to offer to do something if I don't want to do it. And I'm not going to do something hoping to get something in return. If I'm doing something, it's because I want to. It fills up my cup. I know it'll help them, but I'm not looking for like validation from them. I'm not looking for them to like me more. I'm not doing it to, get praise or to be able to like cash in that favor later. I'm doing it because I want to. And I think a lot of people do stuff because they're looking for that validation, or they don't want to ruffle feathers, or they're hoping to get something back in return. And when you get rid of those things, the amount of happiness that you will feel and how much less stress you have, it's amazing. But I mean, it didn't take, like, it didn't happen overnight. Like, this is something I struggled with for a very long time. I'm just figuring out now. But I do want to like recap what we've talked about here. We know shift work has its dangers, right? And it sucks. But that's just kind of what comes with the job, right? There's an increased risk of certain things like chronic diseases and all that kind of stuff, right? And insomnia and blood sugar control and, all the things that we talked about. And it's essential though. We need people like you to keep this world running, to keep us safe, right? You have very important jobs, but those people also tend to be very selfless and give, and people pleasers and not super great with boundaries. So you need to make sure that you take care of you so that you can continue to do the things that you love, to show up as the best version of yourself, to help people every day. So things that you can do to, take care of yourself that might not actually be that challenging, just requires a tiny bit of planning, is use sleep timing and plan naps like we talked about. Try to keep those consistent sleep and wake schedules. That is huge. Avoid caffeine in the later part of your shift to avoid negative sleep effects. Pay attention to when you're eating, when you're exercising, temperature exposure when you're shifting. So remember, if you want to be awake, use the cold temperature if you can, like the cold exposure with like the shower at the end, right? If you're planning to go to sleep right away, then you can enjoy that hot shower before, right? So that's a super easy way to adjust things. Paying attention to your meal timing. We're not going long periods of time when we're awake without food. We're planning our naps for 30 minutes to 2 hours in length, and we're planning them appropriately so that we have enough time to like be awake for our night shift, right? So you're sleeping. You're having that nap for 30 minutes to 2 hours before you're getting ready for your night shift, right? And then same for your day shift. Maintaining general health habits. This is going to be huge. Like getting your movement in, micro and macronutrient intake. This is where carbohydrates and learning your timing of food and getting enough calories is going to be so important, because if you don't, this is where we see shift workers really start to deteriorate, is when they're doing the fasting, is when they're doing low calorie, when they're doing low carb. The effect that it has on hormones and blood sugar and sleep. We know if you're not sleeping, health goes to crap super fast. So we cannot stress that aspect of things enough. And then just doing things that make you happy and have those boundaries, because with shift work, usually it comes with like some time off, right? You get 4 days off in a row or whatever that might be, depending on your schedule. That's a time for you. That's not a time to fill it with just like giving. Yes, it makes you feel good, but at a certain point ends up being too much. So learning that just because you're not working today doesn't mean you're available. And I think that's a really hard thing to navigate. But the women who do this and succeed in this, oh my gosh, they're so much happier. They feel so much better. They sleep better. Like, it's incredible. And boundaries don't mean you're keeping people out. It's you're dedicating some rules around your health. And if you can, like if I have friends, like I have certain boundaries set up. And if you can exist within those boundaries, you are more than welcome in my life, right? We can have a great relationship. We can do all these things. But like that boundary is there to protect my health, my time, so that I'm not burnt out, because I have a tendency to want to people please and say yes to everything when I definitely should not. And a lot of women are exactly the same. So that boundary isn't there to like keep people out. It's like a gate to allow people in who like are willing to respect that and care enough about you to respect that. And I think that comes with many aspects in your health journey when it comes to, maybe you're not wanting to drink as much alcohol or whatever it might be, right? There's certain boundaries in place to help you thrive and have better relationships, to be honest. And I have people that did not like that. And you know what? I'm doing a lot better. It sucks to lose people, but I'm doing a lot better. Hannah, anything you want to close on here?
I just want to like reiterate what you said. It can be really tough to set those boundaries, especially when we are people who are wanting to help others or give or do or just say yes so that you can be there, be a part of things. Yet we can't be our best selves if we're not setting those boundaries and like putting those guidelines for ourselves into place to support our health. And it's mentally super hard in the beginning, though you'll quickly realize how good you physically feel and mentally feel. And so it becomes a lot easier to make those decisions for yourself moving forward. And it's not selfish, because you then get to be a better you any other time that you are spending with those people who may be asking you to go do something and you have that boundary and it's a no. It's okay to say no. It's okay to choose yourself and set these things in place for yourself, because you genuinely will feel physically, mentally, emotionally so much better. You're going to be happier. You're going to have more time to do the things that bring you joy. And so it really is, it's not an easy thing to do, but it's worth the difficulty of doing it all of the time.
Yeah, 100%. As coaches, we're notoriously like have the tendency to people please. We are so bad at answering messages when it's like, there's no such thing as a nutritional emergency. There is no such thing. Like, you are not going to die if I don't answer this message about what cereal is better. Like, you're going to be fine. But like, we have a tendency to people please so much as coaches. So like we do set boundaries, and I break them. I break them all the time. I'm going to be honest. Sometimes we're just like, oh, I feel like answering messages. I'm in a good mood. I'm outside. I'm loving it. It's great. But like there are times like DMs, I only answer like every other day or every few days, because otherwise I could be on my phone literally all the time with the amount of messages that I have between like coaches and our clients and people asking for help on social media. So it is really hard, right? And so like we get it, because like I don't think you'll meet a coach who isn't have a struggle with people pleasing, because we want to help. That's what we do. So I mean, when I go out with Taylor, like when we're in airplane and traveling, he knows that I'm like working, we're grinding, because then it allows me to like not check my phone for an evening and we can be present. Even on our honeymoon, I was checking messages and emails for the first hour and a half of the day. But then it's like, then I got to enjoy the rest of the day in the honeymoon, and it was wonderful, and I got to be present. And then we'd come back to the room. I'd just double check things for like another hour, and then we go out for supper and have like a great evening. But it's like learning what boundaries allow that type of freedom. So it doesn't mean saying no to everything. It's just like, managing how it works best for you to allow you to be present and do the things that you love. So I hope this was helpful. Honestly, the temperature stuff is amazing. The food timing stuff, anything to help with your cortisol levels is going to help immensely. The nap timing, super huge. Those are just a few things that can honestly do so much for you. If you have specific questions, if you need any help at all, like I said, message me. It might take me a couple days because I have my boundaries up, right? But I will always, always, always answer, because this is what I truly love. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.